How's it going, my friends, and welcome to the channel. So before we get into this video, I want to say a massive thank you to everybody that has hung around, and also those that have subscribed to the channel while I've been away and stuck around. I hope you have enjoyed what you've seen, and hopefully you all continue to continue watching videos and help support the channel. So the first other thing, actually, before we go into it, I also apologise for the audio is a little bit squiff compared to other videos. I did mention this in my workshop build video. If you haven't seen that, that'll be in the links in the description down below. While I was doing the recording for that video, mainly the intro part, I dropped my phone, and connected to my phone was the microphone, and the connector snapped, and yes, that's knackered. So I'm having to use a headset, which didn't sound too bad when I was listening to it, so let me know what you think down below. And for this bit, I'm actually using my headphones, so hopefully again it's not too bad. So in this video we are going to be looking at Kinetic's 148th Gr3 Harrier. Now it's a little bit different for me because I generally don't do really modern aircraft. I think the only one that I can think of that I've done on the channel, there was two actually, I've forgotten what the one was, but it was rubbish, so it doesn't really matter anyway. But it was my 32nd Tornado from Revell, which is absolutely, I love that build actually. It was really good. Video series probably wasn't the best, but people seem to be still enjoying that and learning from it, so sweet. But yeah, so we're going to be looking at the Harrier. I do actually quite like the Harrier, to be fair. I'm not a jet person generally, mainly because I can't weather them. But no, I'm not really overly into jets. There's a few sort of older school stuff that I like. That's where you generally see old stuff on here, because that's more my interest. So this one actually is going to be X-Ray Zulu 997, which is actually based at the Royal Air Force Museum at Cosford. It's also known now today as the Royal Air Force Museum Midlands. We have that there. I also do work there, if I haven't mentioned that like God knows how many times already. I was having one of those days where, you know, you just sort of stare into the middle of absolutely nowhere, and I happened to be looking in the direction of the Harrier at that point, and then realised how actually interesting that particular one is. It's dirty for starters, which helps quite a lot, but it has a lot of mismatch of panels and repair jobs on the aircraft. So I started to notice more and more the more I actually looked at it. Took a lot of photos, reference photos of it, which is rare for me because usually I rip a couple off the internet, because of course usually doing World War II stuff, it's quite difficult to actually find a lot of photos of a very specific vehicle or aircraft in some cases. So generally it's quite difficult, so I don't usually bother all that much. I kind of use a couple of reference photos, original reference photos, and kind of go from that and use a little bit of artistic license with them. This one, I actually had the chance to actually photograph the actual aircraft, and she's actually in the state as when she finished in service. And as like I said, I was taking a lot of photos. I think I took about 200 of this aircraft, and loads. Most of them are small details, a lot of which are underneath, which a lot you can't see, so I didn't necessarily bother actually putting in because you won't see it. I did a few which are very unnoticeable, I think, unless you really look at it and when I tell you about it. So there's quite a lot of repaints, and a lot of them are hard line camos rather than, you know, basically been sprayed on. So there's a few that were done across the leading edge of the wing. I didn't notice it really until I started taking photos, so it's one of those details. I've done it because it was there, but you may not necessarily notice it, to be fair. So but yeah, I'm going to stop waffling because you don't really care. You just want to see the model. So grab yourself a brew and a bicky, and let's get started.
Okay, let's have a quick look through everything. So we'll start with the instructions. So pretty much everything you need, obviously, is there. They're not too bad. I've worked with a lot worse. We start out with, the sprue tree there, telling you where all the parts are, colour call out. And to be fair, generally everything is quite straightforward. Everything's laid out really nicely, and it's pretty easy to understand. Also giving you your choices of either or of optional parts, depending obviously which variant of the Harrier you're going to be doing. They also give you several different markings for the Harrier, obviously depending on whether you're doing the early or the late version. They're all pretty much the same, obviously just different particular airframes, including the one I'm particularly interested in doing, which is going to be this one, which is X-Ray Zulu 997. The detailing within the kit actually is pretty good. The exterior detail is really nicely done and very true to the actual aircraft, though there are a few sort of lacking details, which I will get to quite shortly. But again, that detail is really nicely fine, and just I'm just quite impressed by it. The cockpit detail in general is not too bad. The SNEB Pods, on the other hand, this is an issue for me. But again, I will get to in a little bit further through the video. And obviously an absolute stunning decal sheet there with some really good decals. No, but they're really, really nicely printed. The kit also comes with a small photo etch thread, which I think I used all of 4 parts of. Everything else I will show you in a second. The clear parts are extremely good. As you can see here, they are pretty crystal clear. It probably comes as no surprise that I'm going to be using a load of Edard upgrade kits. In fact, this is the Big Ed upgrade kit, which comes with pretty much everything you're going to want. So cockpit details, some canopy masks you saw at the start, cockpit details, some general details, and some roof before flight tags. I also got this Master Hobbies, I think it was, brass turned pitot tube and angle of attack probe. I also managed to get my hands on some better SNEB Pods. These are 3D printed by a guy I found on Brit Modeler, Flying Badger. I will put a link in the description, and hopefully in the top right hand corner, to this guy's Brit Modeler page. But these are absolutely fantastic. They're reasonably priced. I think I paid about £4 for the pair. They may have changed in price slightly, but they are fantastically detailed. A little bit of a sand needs to be done. He also does these versions, which are the empty versions, and you can see literally right the way through. So the end of the SNEB, the main part of it, and sort of like the exhausted part, all completely clear, which is really cool if you want to do that version. So we're going to start obviously with the cockpit. I'm using some sticky aluminium foil tape stuff to add a little bit sort of detail to the seats, rather than just them being completely flat. This stuff obviously is extremely flexible, as you can see. If you put it on quite roughly, it gives you a couple of little lines there, just to give you that sort of seat texture kind of thing to it. And as you can see, quite easy to cut off with a hobby blade. So I mean, it's not much, but it's you know, it's just a nice little sort of added extra detail rather than that just straight up plain seat. It's been a lot easier than trying to actually make some sort of fabric texture. Now, it says the detail of the main cockpit itself is actually quite nicely detailed, but of course I've got the big headset. Obviously it requires removing pretty much all that detail. As you can see, quite easily done with the scalpel blade. And then it's just quite simply just cutting out the photo etch details. Now, for some reason at this point, I have decided to show you the step pedals at this point rather than the actual cockpit. I've only just realised this, but you can see it all goes down the same way. So I've used some contact super glue. This one's VMS's rubber black 5K, if I remember rightly. This gives you a little bit of time to put the item down, fettle around with it and put it into the right position. I mean, of course, these aren't really going to be seen. It's one of those little details they always give you, but nobody's going to really notice it. But of course, you know, we've got video evidence of me actually doing this, so I suppose that will have to do. So, to reasons unknown to myself, we're jumping ahead a little bit. It's all done and painted. The back wall itself is actually quite plainly detailed, so I've made a few greeblies to fill up the back. Just basically some wires. If you want to make sort of like corded type wires, just wrap it round another piece of wire, make a little concertina wire, and then that will do. As you can see here, the two parts of the main control panel going together, and it all installed into place. I mean, the colour wasn't exactly right, unfortunately. I will have to say for that. So the colour I painted the cockpit, I actually had to hand paint around the dials. Now, for a lot of people, that's probably not going to be the right colour, but referencing off the actual aircraft, that actually is quite close to the right colour. It's this really weird light blue colour. Before we can start assembling the rest of the aircraft, we have these, this little sort of, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to call it a jig, which basically will go inside the main part of the fuselage. The thruster exhausts will stick on to these, and it just makes it so that you can move individually but as a pair, if that makes sense at all. Now, before obviously that all goes in, there's a few more extra details to go in these bays. Again, you're not going to see them. I do this to myself. I've actually found that I actually quite enjoy doing it regardless of whether it's going to be seen. The only other little detail that I need to sort out was this sink mark, which again using Flexi 5K black rubber super glue. This is actually quite good because once it's set, it doesn't shrink, and you can just sand it back, and that will give you, a smooth finish. The only reason of doing this is because it actually is in with the intake, so you will actually see this. Again, another detail that's not going to be seen in the main wheel bay. That one is so far up there, you're not going to see it unless you've got a mirror and some lighting underneath. There's a few that need to go within the wheel bay doors as well. So this bit was a little bit tricky. I wasn't actually quite sure on how this went in initially, so I just fettled around with it, and apparently this is actually the way it was supposed to actually go. It was a bit fiddly. It always is when you try and put several parts into one thing, but to be fair, once it all seated, actually everything surprisingly came together really well. Normally these sort of things they tend to push the fuselage apart, but actually these went in quite well. The note that needs to be sorted out was sort of like the inner part of the intake before the fan needed a few gaps filling as well as a couple across the top and bottom of the main fuselage, but they're nothing much. So I used some plastic putty from Vallejo. This is actually quite good stuff. I use it quite a bit to fill any gaps. So just put it in, let it go for a little bit, and then just a bit of tap water and a brush, or even a cotton wool bud, which actually tends to work a little bit better. For some reason I went for the brush option. I think it's because this was actually quite a deep gap to fill, but it fills really nicely. Then we kind of come across the first sort of problem with this. These wings don't fit, the lower half of the wings doesn't fit to the top very well. See that little kind of panel there? That needs to be cut out to actually make it fit. Whichever wing option you went for, this was still the same issue. So decent sharp blade, very gently cut that off, and the two sections will seat very nicely. So here you can see the parts actually fit quite nicely together after that section was taken out. Once it's glued, there was a slight bit of sanding to get that leading edge to join, but generally it was pretty good. Now this bit of photo etch was actually quite daunting to do. So it involves removing the original vortex generators on the wing and using this little jig to help seat the new ones, which are quite small and need to be folded in sort of like a quarter. So as you can see, I've taped it all off. There actually is, you may have seen the first bit of that jig, there's a couple of like little notches. They actually line up with the one of the panels, and all you do is again is super glue those into place. It did make it a lot easier actually. So taping off that jig to the top wing made it a hell of a lot easier to get those fitted. One of the other sort of probably less noticeable imperfections with the detail of the kit, part of the leading edge actually steps off on the lower wing for some reason. I don't know if the earlier one had this sort of step off, I'm not quite sure, but we can see that green stuff, epoxy putty, I've got sort of ending on the left. That's where it actually should fit. But yeah, as you can see, that section of green stuff is the bit that I had to fill. Took a little bit of going, mainly because I'm not very good at doing that sort of thing. But eventually I got it all smoothed off, sanded, and actually looked true to the original aircraft. While I was tinkering with the mods, I thought I might as well get on with doing the pitot tube, which to be fair could have been done way later on. But I was in one of those moods where I was just flip-flopping between bits and bobs. So all I need to do was fit this pitot tube onto the nose. Very simple. All I need to do was cut off the original one and stick this on, and it is literally as straightforward as that. So I've cut it off at where it sort of starts and ends on the nose, and then all I need to do was drill a small hole into that part, and that was the right diameter for the upgrade part, and super glue it into place. Simple as that, and actually makes a hell of a difference on the moulded version. Now again, flip-flopping through doing bits. I noticed on the real aircraft there was actually this patch that was put onto sort of the lower tail section of the Harrier, and all I did was use a scrap bit of brass and just sort of filed it into the right shape. I also purposely left that super glue around the edge there as looked like the bit that was glued on. I then moved on to the heat shields, which again are from the Edar kit. These were quite easily done. It actually comes with like a sort of gate piece on the end of it, which you fold over, using something like a biro just to press in those grooves in there to give it the right shape, if you like. I also had to sand off the original detail, sand it on off enough that this would sit flush with the start of the heat shield, and just clamped them together with bulldog clip to make sure they actually stayed onto the model. It also helps actually sanding the back of the photo etch part, which will adhere properly. Now finally moving on to actually putting stuff together. The fan needs to go in first, so that was painted as well as the intakes, so I could blank all that off and spray the rest of the model without getting the overspray on that fan. With the wing part glued onto the model, there was a bit of a step and a kind of more of a step to it, which shouldn't have really been there. I have heard of people having this similar problem, but others generally gone together quite well. But I didn't find it too obscene, so I left it as it was and went straight on to painting. So of course, as pretty much most times, I started off with a pre-shade. I actually did this the opposite way around because I haven't got any black primer. So I did everything pretty much in reverse. So once that was done, could move on to the part that I've been looking forward to mostly of this model is a lot of weathering. So the main camo went down in a relatively cloudy fashion, to give that slight mottled effect. There was also quite a few mismatch of panels, as you can see here. As you can see that the camo lines don't align with the main body camo lines, if you like. So that was easily done by just putting a bit of masking tape around that area and putting in the camo lines, obviously slightly skew from the ones on the rest of the main camo. Also, the eagle-eyed view of probably may have noticed I've done this the opposite way round. So all that was left to do was fill in the rest of the camo lines, basically. Again, like I said, I did it in a cloudy fashion, just to give it that sort of mottled look. It is also slightly lighter because the later weathering stages will darken this off. The colour also may look a little bit off in general because the actual aircraft's camo scheme, or the green in particular, was a weird greeny brown colour as well. So some of the details on the roof, you can see there's weird fading. There's also a patch in the top corner. So again, simple masking off those areas, and all I did was just add quite a bit of yellow to that mix just to brine it off. I also did the same for any grey patches that are on the aircraft, just adding, I think I used a little bit of black with this, so I think I used sea grey for this from Tamiya, and it was RF dark green for the main camo. I think I added some a little bit of brown in there as well. I do apologise, I've completely forgotten the colours I used for this, because I did this actually quite a bit far back from this edit, so I do apologise. You can also see both sides also had a patch painted over, which had another squadron marking, which was a conversion squadron, which I believe is the reason for this particular patch, and having obviously the number 4 squadron badge repainted. Unfortunately, at the time of painting this particular part, my computer wasn't working with me, so I had no reference photos, so I went off the camo that was in the instructions, which you can see were a little bit off. so I had to go back and repaint. Other sections of the aircraft I'd noticed had actually been hand painted, so we had more of a harder camo line compared to the rest of the aircraft, which was more of a soft camo line. So there was little patches done, the leading edges were also hand painted, and some, again, as you can see, around the intake, which I just painted by hand, which I felt gave more of a, well, hand painted finish. I believe the tail ailerons were either replaced or repainted at some point, because again these have got a like more of a harder camo, so I have used blue tack for this particular part. Again, I was following the instructions at this point, and the camo on these sections are actually back to front, so I had to redo those. And again, tail sections, you can see the original bit that I painted, and then the rest of it was redone at a later date. As we move on to the decaling stage, this went down pretty straightforward. Decals went on really well. The most complicated bit was the raindle to get around the fillets there. So to try and replicate some of the original fading on these ones in particular, I used some white oil paints and just sort of dabbed it in to blunt those off, and I risked some Tamiya extra thin here for some of these decals to make them look like they've been torn rather than actually trying to tear them. I've also decided to try something completely different with this kit, and actually do all my weathering using oil paints. Now, I've used some cheap artist oil paints, nothing fancy for this, and I used a mix of burnt umber, a little bit of black in there as well. Again, same for the what I believe is just probably filth and dirt that's been kicked up from the exhaust, and maybe some dirt that's left the aircraft from somewhere. I just slapped all that along the bottom and blended it all in with some white spirits. Again, all these details I've got from the actual aircraft, because it's in the original condition it was left in. So yeah, I think I did quite a decent job on those, considering I'm using oils for the first time rather than Tamiya panel liner. So for the exhausts and the heat shields, I actually used Vallejo Air Silver, and then dry brushed the gunmetal, then dry brushed the silver over again, and used the same wash as I did before. So as we move on to tanks and the SNEB Pods, there was nothing really to write home about here, but as you can see, I've also put the remove before flight tags in, just sort of bent them round and shakes again the photo etch, and just put a little bit of a wash over those to make them look a little bit dirty and used. I also decided to put one a cover, with the remove before flight tag on, over the PO tube and the probe, angle of attack probe, which was completely pointless even buying the upgrade kit, because this was a last minute decision to put these on, so I might as well not bothered with them, but actually I'm quite glad I did it anyway. So at the last hurdle, removing the canopy masks, I found these marks on the inside of the canopy. I couldn't remember what glue I used initially to put the canopy pieces on, but I came to the conclusion I think it was glue and glaze, but there must have been a bit of seepage in there, and it went up around the sort of dashboard, so I had to remove them. I used several different grits of sandpaper to get rid of them, which I've never done before, so it's quite daunting, but I think in the end I think I did quite well to actually get rid of them. I did give them a bit of a coating with like a gauzy to fill in the scratches. They're not amazing, it's not an amazing finish on that, but with the stuff I had to hand, I actually think I did quite a decent job. I also had the same issue with the rear canopy, but actually that was I touched it with some enamel wash, and I had the same. I actually had a fogging with that one, and had to do exactly the same thing with that in the end.
So there we go, my friends. It's nearly time to show you the finished model. But before we get to that, I want to thank you guys ever so much for watching the video. It's greatly appreciated, and it does help the channel. It'll help even more now that I've been away for a large period of time, because YouTube doesn't favour that sort of thing. So, you know, again, thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Please share this video if you think it's any good to others. Also, please let me in the comment section. Let me know in the comment section down below actually what you think of this build and how I have pulled it off. But I've really actually enjoyed this one, to be fair, and it's just, yeah, it's been a great build. Couple of little niggly things. I mean, these are proper like nitpicky sort of issues. Not really issues, to be fair, but the main tyres are smooth rather than being treaded, which I did try and do. It didn't really work out, so I didn't do it. But the outrigger ones have got tread on, and it's little things like that. It's just, they're dumb little things to pick up on. But it just kind of surprised me with the exterior detail that they would have done that. Sort of the same in the cockpit, the wall behind the pilot's seat. There's no detail whatsoever. I mean, yet in the actual aircraft it's crammed full of detail, but I wouldn't expect that level of detail to be put in. But just a couple of wires maybe moulded into some, just a little something, which hence obviously is the why I added the wires in myself. Again, it's a stupid nitpick, because to be honest with you, it's a decent kit actually. A little bit pricey, I think. I actually did pick this up second hand, so I think I paid 60 quid for it. I think, no, 50 quid, sorry. I think it retails about somewhere between 60 and 70, or say 75, which I think is a little bit expensive for the kit. But if you could pick up one second hand that nobody's actually started on, I'd probably do that, to be fair. But all in all, it is still it was a good build, and really nicely detailed kit. Oh yeah, the SNEB Pods, that annoyed me quite a bit for some reason, but obviously I got those upgrade ones, which again, the guide that I got those from off Britain Modeler, I will link also down below as well, because they're actually really good, and he hopes to also off that hopefully build up a bit more of a larger business and do some more stuff. So fingers crossed for him that works out, because they were really good, and I was absolutely really impressed with them. So if you want them, they'll be in the link down below. So enough waffle. Again, thanks for watching. Enjoy the finished model, and I'll catch you again hopefully really soon. Just really quickly before we go to the finished model, because I forgot this bit, which is bad on my part. The weathering for this video, or on this on the Harrier, using just solid oil paints, I actually got from the Inner Nerd. He's done the exact same kit 10 times better than what I have done, but go and check that video as well, because it's absolutely brilliant and fantastic build, fantastic finish of the model. So yeah, so that'll be in the link description part down below, so go and check him out, give him some love, give him a sub. So yeah, finished model, catch you again soon.